Okay, so today we're going to be doing trig graphs with shifts. So you guys should all be on page 27 in your notes packet. Pause me if you need to. Turn to page 27, and we're going to be looking at number 1. Please make sure that you're taking notes of all of this in your packet. Okay, so we've been doing trig graphs, but now we're going to have some shifts. So if you look at the first question here, we can see that we have y equals sine 2x plus 1. Okay, and hopefully from doing other kinds of graphs, you realize that here we have a shift. Okay, and remember, if we just have like a plus 1 or a minus 5 or, plus or minus any kind of number, that's going to be a vertical shift. But let's start with the first thing. We're going to fill in what the amplitude is. And remember, the amplitude is the number in front of the word sine or cosine. So then, since there is no number there, we always assume that's a 1. And then we know that the amplitude is 1, so let's put the 1 there. Okay, vertical shift. Vertical shift is always going to be this number at the end, plus or minus. So we have a vertical shift of plus 1, which means we are going to go up. That's up 1, okay? Or you can just write 1. I like to write what it's doing, going up or down. It just makes it easier when you go to do the graph. All right, phase shift. We are just going to write none for right now. And the reason being is if you just quickly want to look, we're going to do it in a minute, but if you look at page 29, okay, look at either 8, 9, or 10. Your phase shifts are those things inside parentheses, aka horizontal shift, but we'll deal with that in a couple of minutes. So for right now, if you don't have parentheses and anything inside there, we don't need to worry about it. Okay, the period of the graph, remember you know that is, and I'm just going to write it right down here, period is 2 pi over the frequency, okay, and we can see that our frequency right here is 2. So basically then all we're doing is 2 pi over 2, right? So 2 pi, the frequency is 2, so we end up with a period of pi. So remember, that means how long it takes to complete one full curve. So we will be done with one full curve by the time we get to pi. All right, now this interval thing, and I'm also going to write this down here because this is kind of new, and it's not a big deal. To determine the interval, and you want to write this on your page so that you have this for notes. Interval, you're always going to take your period and you're going to divide it by 4. Okay, so your period in this case is pi. We divide it by 4. So your interval is, I don't know why I can't write pi's today, pi over 4. Okay, so let's start with the fact that we have a vertical shift. I'm going to work my way down here. Okay, we have a vertical shift of 1. So what we're going to do is, normally when we start a sine curve or a cosine curve, right, don't we? Well, let's say we start a sine curve because we have a sine curve here. We would usually start on the x-axis, right? But when we have a vertical shift, what's going to happen is this x-axis is going to kind of get like shifted up 1 because we're going up 1. So what I mean by that is this. I'm going to go, and this is really kind of up to you because we have no scale, so you can space your little slashy things as far apart as you want. But that's going to be 1 and negative 1. And then what I'm going to do, let me do this in a different color so you can see it a little bit better, is the shift up 1, I always tend to just make a dotted horizontal line wherever your vertical shift is, okay, up 1. So now that blue dotted line is kind of like your x-axis now, so to speak. All right, the next thing that I want to do is I want to talk about your interval. And basically what this interval means is, remember when we were doing trig graphs, you would have 4 slashes right here on your x-axis, right? And the first one would be pi over 2, and then we would have pi, and then 3 pi over 2, and then 2 pi. Well, we're not going to have that. We're going to have intervals of pi over 4. So what you're going to do is your first slash is going to be pi over 4. Your second slash is going to be pi over 4 plus another pi over 4. Okay, so wouldn't that be, I'm going to repeat that again. So it'd be pi over 4 because we're going to go in increments of pi over 4. So pi over 4 and another pi over 4, right? Pi over 4 plus another pi over 4. Isn't that 2 pi over 4, which is just really pi over 2, right? Okay, so this is pi over 2. All right, now remember, pi over 4 is really 45 degrees. So this is 45 degrees. This is 90 degrees. Now I'm going to go up another 45 degrees, which is going to be 135, right? Okay, and so then that's going to be pi over 4 plus another pi over 4 plus another pi over 4. So isn't that 3 pi over 4? So this is going to be 3 pi over 4. And then we have one more. And I'm just going to go down here. And if I add another pi over 4, do you see that that's 4 pi over 4, which is really just pi. Okay, and you'll get the hang of this. We won't need to be doing all of this math work down here. You'll eventually get the hang of it on how to scale properly. So it's pi over 4. Technically, this is 2 pi over 4, which is pi over 2. This is 3 pi over 4. And this is technically 4 pi over 4. We just simplify it, okay? All right, so now you know that a sine curve normally starts and finishes, and in the middle, starts, finishes, and in the middle on the x-axis, right? Well, we're not at the x-axis anymore. We're at this little pretend x-axis. Okay, so what you're going to do is we're going to kind of do, it behaves the same way. So we are going to put a dot on the now new-ish x-axis, all right? That's your shift. In the middle, it's also at 0, and at the end, it's also at 0. So nothing's really changed. Okay, now what we need to figure out is what's happening in between here. Oops. There we go, in between here. So in the middle would be pi over 4, and in the middle over here would be 3 pi over 4. Well, let's look at what the amplitude. The amplitude is 1. So if we're already at 1, that means our amplitude here would have to go up to a y value of 2, right? So let me just put a little slash here at 2, and at pi over 4, I'm going to be up at 2. Okay, so my graph is going to look like that. And then I'm going to do the same thing at 3 pi over 4, but I'm going down 1, which will put me right there on the x-axis. And there's your graph. Okay, voila. Make sure that you have this. Again, please make sure that you have this in your notes. Okay, so let's turn the page, go to page 28, look at number 6. So we're going to do the same thing that we just did on number 1. Now we know that the amplitude is 3, that's the number all the way in front. The vertical shift is -2, that's the number at the end. Okay, and we are going to be going down, so you can write down 2 if you prefer instead of -2. All right, phase shift, we still don't have that yet, so I'm just going to put a slash there. We don't have one. All right, the period of the graph, remember the period is 2 pi over the frequency, and the frequency is this 2 right here. Okay, so that's going to be 2 pi over 2, which we know is just pi. All right, interval. I'm going to write that down here. Remember, the interval is the period over 4. So our period is pi, so that means our interval is going to be pi over 4, just like the last one, right? Okay, so just like the last one, let's see if we remember without looking back. So that means our first slash is going to be 1 pi over 4. Right? Our second slash is going to be 2 pi over 4, but really I'm just going to simplify that and write pi over 2. Our third slash is going to be 3 pi over 4. And our last slash is going to be 4 pi over 4, but remember, that just reduces to pi. Okay? All right, now the next thing that I like to do is to look at that vertical shift, and I'm going to draw that horizontal line, okay? And the vertical shift is down 2. So actually, let me, before I do that, I have an amplitude of 3, so I'm just going to go 1, 2, 3. Then I'm going to go 1, 2, 3. Okay, all right. So now let me put that vertical line. And we're going to put it at -2, so I am going to kind of go like this-ish. Okay, all right, so there's my vertical shift. All right, so now, think of how a cosine curve normally behaves, right? Doesn't a cosine curve normally start at its maximum and finish at its maximum? So normally, we would be starting here at 3, right? So I would be starting at 1, 2, 3 right here. I'd be starting here, and I would be ending here, correct? But I'm not, because I have to shift it down 2. So what I'm going to do is my maximum would normally be at 3, but I'm shifting it down 2. So if I'm here at 3, shift down 1, 2. Now that means my maximum is going to start here, and it's going to end here. So we're going to put 2 points right in those spots. Okay? So I'm going to put my start here and my finish there. Okay? All right, now let's talk about what happens smack dab in the middle. So here are my 2 maximums. In the middle of pi over 2, shouldn't I be going down to its minimum? Okay, now let's just count real quick here. From my, we call this a midline, by the way. This is a midline. That's your middle point. Okay, and look, from this midline, I have 1, 2, 3 spaces away from the midline. That's where that amplitude comes in. So that means that my minimum is going to be 3 spaces away from this midline, but in this direction. So 1, and then I need to go 2 more, right? Okay, so let me just put slashes. I'm going to extend that y-axis down just a little bit there. There we go. So you should be 1, 2, 3, 4 at -5, right? Okay, so we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and at pi over 2, you're going to be down at -5. All right, so let's put a dot there. Okay, so there we go. Now, remember what happens to a normal cosine curve in the middle of all of this stuff. It should hit the x-axis. Now, remember we have a vertical shift, so this is kind of like our pseudo x-axis, that midline there. So then what we're going to do is at pi over 4, we're going to put a dot, and at 3 pi over 4, we're going to put a dot on the midline. And then connect those points, make sure you flare, and there's your graph. Okay? Now just a couple things that I want you to sort of notice that I didn't talk about in the last one. But look, it says the period is pi. Remember, the period means how long it takes to complete a full curve. And look, start to finish, you're ending at pi. Okay? Okay, let's look at the one below it, number 7. Now, we have a phase shift. Okay, but let's take one step at a time here. Okay, so the amplitude we know is 3, right? The vertical shift we know is down 1. Phase shift. So a phase shift just means a horizontal shift. Please remember, when you're horizontal shifting here, it's in the opposite direction of that sign. So we're going to be shifting to the left, pi over 4. Okay, so for the phase shift, you're going to write left, and then you're going to write pi over 4. Okay, all right, period of the graph is 2 pi over the frequency. Okay, well, we don't have a number in here, so we assume it's 1. So in that case then, our period is going to be 2 pi over 1, which is just 2 pi. Okay, remember that your interval is your period divided by 4. So your interval is pi over 2. Okay, so let's start with that. So if our interval is pi over 2, what that means is these slashy things are going in increments of pi over 2. Well, that's what we kind of were used to, right? So we're going to have pi over 2 here. I'm going to have pi here, 3 pi over 2 here, and 2 pi there. Okay. I have an amplitude of 3, so I'm going to go 1, 2, 3. You know what? I'll go another one just in case. You never know. And then we've got 1, 2, 3, and I'll go another one right there. So we've got 4 there and negative 4 there, right? Okay, so let's look at the vertical shift. The vertical shift is negative 1. So how about we draw a midline then at negative 1. So I'm going to dot it. There's my midline. Okay, so that's kind of like my new x-axis, right? Okay, so now I'm going to go through this phase shift slowly. So normally a cosine curve, right, would start high and finish high. So if we have an amplitude that's 3 and we're shifting down 1, normally, don't draw anything, just watch, do you see that I would start here then at 2? Okay, because I initially would start at 3, but I'm shifting down 1. So normally my cosine curve would start here and it would end there at 2. 2 pi comma 2 and 0 comma 2. Everybody agree? Now, here's the thing. We have what we call a phase shift, which is a horizontal shift. So we're going to take, let's say, for example, this point, and we're going to move it to the left pi over 4. Now remember, pi over 4 is 45 degrees, but we're in increments of 90 degrees. So if I want to go 45 in this direction, I'm going to need something here, right, on my x-axis. So what I would suggest that you do is let's just mirror it. That's going to be negative pi over 2, right? Okay, but here's the problem. The problem is that I'm not taking this starting point here and shifting it to the left pi over 2. I'm shifting it to the left pi over 4, which is half of this. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to do it in red. I know that this right here is negative pi over 4. So you know what? I'm going to do that everywhere here on the right, smack dab in the middle. Just put a slash. We don't need to label it. We're just going to put a slash. All those red slashes represent increments of pi over 4. Okay? All right. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go back again. I have an amplitude of 3, but I'm shifting down 1. So a normal cosine curve would start right here. But because I'm shifting to the left pi over 4, I'm just going to go right here, and at that red slash, I'm going to put a dot up at 2. Okay? All right, so everybody do that. And you know what? I'll keep it in red. So there's my start of my graph. Now, remember, the end of the graph normally would end here, up at 2 also, right? But I have to shift to the left pi over 4. So at this red slash, you're actually going to put a dot there, up at 2. Okay, so that's going to go right there. So there's your beginning and your end. Now let's find the middle, because we know at the middle we should be, now let's talk about this. Okay, so normally I would be at negative 3, but I'm going to be shifting down, so I'm going to be at negative 4. Normally it would be right here, right? Wouldn't pi be the middle of 0 and 2 pi? But again, I'm shifting to the left pi over 4. So right here, I'm going to be down at negative 4. Okay, so everybody put a dot there. So there we go. Okay, all right, let's keep going. All right, again, normally a normal cosine curve, here at pi over 2 and at 3 pi over 2, I would be on the x-axis. Well, first of all, I'm going to be down here because the midline, right, is our little pseudo x-axis. So normally I would be here and I would be here. But I have to shift to the left pi over 4, and here I need to shift to the left pi over 4. So those are going to be the spots that you're putting your next set of points. Okay? So I'm going to be right there, and I'm going to be right there. And then there's your graph. Okay? Again, make sure that you're taking notes, putting everything in your packet. All right, let's look at number 8. So the amplitude is 2, not negative 2, okay, because the negative just determines the direction. Amplitude's always a positive number. Vertical shift, we do not have one. I'm just going to put a line because I kind of can't fit it, but you should probably write none. Phase shift. So we have pi over 2, but you notice it's a minus sign, so it's the opposite direction. So we're actually going to be going to the right, pi over 2. The period of the graph, remember, is 2 pi over the frequency. The frequency is 1, so that means that our period is just 2 pi. Okay? All right, then our interval is, remember, it's the period over 4. So 2 pi over 4, which is just going to be pi over 2. Okay. So our slashes then are going to be in increments of pi over 2, which is what you're used to. Just for the sake of this looking a little bit prettier, I'm just going to not do the fractions because then I can't write so small on the iPad. So here we go. You should be putting in the pi over 2 and the 3 pi over 2. All right, we have no vertical shift. So we don't have to worry about that. Okay, and let's see what we have here. Well, I do know that we're going to be flipped. So a normal cosine curve, right, would start up. This cosine curve is going to start down. So how about we label this? That would be nice, right? 1, 2, and then -1, -2. So our cosine curve, normally, because this is a -2, we are actually going to start down here and finish here, normally. But we are shifting to the right pi over 2. So what's going to happen is instead of the point starting here, we're going to shift to the right pi over 2, and we're going to start there. So let's put a dot there. Okay. All right. Now let's think of where our graph would normally end. Normally, our graph would end here, but we're shifting to the right pi over 2. So we're going to actually put another slash here, and we're just going to shift it out. Okay? Not a big deal. We don't need to label what it is or anything like that. Just make it equally spaced apart. So what I mean by that is if these are all equally spaced apart, you want to do the same thing right here. Okay? And then we're going to put a dot there down at -2. All right, well now, so our middle is shifted a little bit here. So normally our middle would be at pi, so we're just going to shift over to 3 pi over 2, right? Isn't that going to be our middle? And it should just go up to a +2, because remember, with a cosine curve, it's going to go in the opposite direction there in the middle. So we're going to have a dot right there. And then hopefully you realize that at pi and 2 pi, we're going to hit the x-axis. Make sure you flare, and there's your picture. All right, number 9. We got a whole lot going on in number 9. So we know the amplitude is 3. The vertical shift is a +1, or you can write up 1. I just have trouble fitting it in there. All right, the phase shift is, we're going to go to the left pi over 2, right? Left pi over 2. Okay, the period of the graph is 2 pi over the frequency, which is right there. So our period is going to be pi. And then our interval is that period divided by 4. So pi over 4. So our slashes here are not going to be what we're normally used to. We're going to go in increments of pi over 4. So pi over 4. Remember, the next one is 2 pi over 4, but I'm just going to write that as pi over 2. The next one is 3 pi over 4. And the next one is 4 pi over 4, but I'm going to write that as pi. Okay? All right, so let's look 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4, and I'm going to label those. All right, last thing we need to do is let's get that vertical shift. We want to get the midline in. So we know that we're going up 1. So that means our midline is going to be right there at 1. Okay, well, let's see. A sine curve, right, normally would start here at 0. In the middle would be 0, and at the end would be 0, right? But we are shifting to the left pi over 2. So instead of being here, I have to go backwards pi over 2. All right, now, in terms of our scale here, going back pi over 2 means going back 2 slashes. So then what I'm going to do here on the left side of the x-axis is go like this, and there's your negative pi over 2. You can call this negative pi over 4 also if you like. So what I'm going to do is, again, instead of being here, I'm going to go back to pi over 2, which is going to be right there. So let's plot that point. Okay, and a normal sine curve would start here and would finish here, right? But I have to shift it back to pi over 2. Well, this is a shift of pi over 4, so I need to go one more, and there's a shift of pi over 2. So we're going to put our next dot right there. There we go, that's better. All right, and then normally a sine curve again would start here, it would end here, and in the middle it would be here. But we have to shift that back pi over 2. Well, that's pi over 4, shift back a little bit more, one more, and there is your middle right there. Okay, okay. Then a normal sine curve in between here would go up to its maximum, right? Well, we know we have an amplitude of 3, so we're at 1. So this middle is going to go up 1, 2, 3 spots, right up there to 4. Okay, so let's put a dot there. And then we know at pi over 4, it's going to also go down 3 spots. So 1, 2, 3. So that's going to be at negative 2. Pi over 4, negative 2 right there. And now we just connect the dots. All right, so we're going to do number 14, and I would like you to just pause and, well, check out my answers there, okay, when you're done, and just make sure you have everything. And then after that, what I'd like you to do is just graph it. And so pause the video, take your time, graph it, and then you can unpause the video and you can look and see what the answer is. So here is the answer. Check that out. And just keep in mind again, we don't need to label this extra slash, we just need to have it there. Okay, so everything just shifted pi over 2 to the right. All right, so I'd like you to take a minute, do the same thing with 15. So I'm going to give you a second, pause the video, see if you can fill out this set of things here on the left, unpause and look, and then we'll go from there. And there are your answers right there. So if you want to pause the video, check everything, and then when you're done, go ahead, work on the graph, and then you can unpause the video again, and I will have the graph up for you to check. All right, and that's what your picture should look like. What I did was, since the interval was pi over 2, but the shift was only pi over 4, all of these red slashes just mean increments of pi over 4. Okay, so this is a distance of pi over 4. I just cut this interval right here in half, and the same thing here, I cut it in half, and so on and so on. All right? Okay, so now, when you're done with all of this and you have everything written down, just remember your homework, you have the review sheet to work on, and you also have a Delta Math bonus. So you should be working on that as well.